Welcome to Private Equity Profits. Clifford Locks is a certified board of director, a trusted confidant to CEOs, C-level exec, and high-potential employees to help them clarify goals, unlock their potential, and create actionable strategic plans. Seth Green is the nation's foremost authority on growing your business. He is the founder of the direct response marketing firm Market Domination LLC, and he is an 8-time best-selling author who has been interviewed on NBC, CBS, Forbes, Inc., CBS Money Watch, and many more. Cliff and Seth interview top players in the financial sector, focusing on private equity and real estate funds, discussing developments and trends shaping the industry. These experts will share with you how they've leveraged the power of equity funding to grow their businesses and increase profits, and how you can too. And now, here's your host, Cliff Locks.
Welcome to the Private Equity Profits Podcast. I'm Cliff Locks, your host, and with me today is Larry Kaplan, founder and managing partner at CSG Partners, LLC. Larry has built the nation's leading leveraged employee stock ownership plan. It's an ESOP practice and is actively involved in all aspects of CSG's investment banking activities. He helps owners of private middle market companies achieve equity monetization while addressing personal goals such as business continuity, legacy, and estate planning. His expertise in capital structures and ESOP optimization has led to hundreds of successful liquidity transactions and numerous accolades from industry organizations. Tell me how you got started, Larry, and what led you to private equity.
Sure. I was working at a middle market accounting firm in New York in their consulting group, doing some general consulting. We also had this M&A side of our business. And I was working with one young individual that had started a company, was 34 years old, was constantly reinvesting in his business and wanted to sell the company. And we had taken the company to market. He had gotten some bids from private equity, a few from strategic, and they were really low, 3 to, let's say, 4 to 4.5 times EBITDA. This is about 21 years ago. And at the same time, we were doing some work for the garment center company, Bill Blass, that he had passed away and his estate was selling their interest. And I found out they had an employee stock ownership plan. Bill actually sold a piece of his companies earlier, and he used that money to fund, which now I think the name has changed, but was the then Bill Blass reading room at the New York Public Library. And I became interested in the ESOP. I knew nothing about it. And I started talking to people that were involved in that ESOP. I spoke to their attorney, and they were telling me the tax benefits that you receive when he sold to the ESOP. And I knew nothing about that. And I said, that's amazing, actually. I said, these tax benefits are really incredible. You don't pay capital gains taxes. The company receives tax deductions equal to the sale value. And so I started going around to the partners at this firm, which was an excellent firm. And I started asking them what they knew about ESOPs. And everything that they knew about ESOPs was completely wrong. They just didn't have any of the facts. And these are very smart audit and tax people. And I said, look, there's this major disconnect in the marketplace between what's reality and what this product actually is. And so we then took this company down the road of selling to an ESOP. He got as much money after tax if he would have sold the company. And it became a huge success because 3 years later, he sold to the ESOP initially for value of the company was $40 million. 3 years later, he ended up selling the company for $140 million. He walked away with a ton more money. The employees walked away. I think there were maybe 50 of them with over $40 million. It was a major success. And that's what led me to say there's this opportunity in the market because business owners don't understand ESOP transactions, nor do their professional advisors, the one that I came across. And that's how I got started.
I appreciate that. Tell me about your employee stock ownership plans and how they are funded.
Sure. We like to tell business owners that doing an ESOP is doing a leverage buy out of your own company. Right? Just like a private equity firm is going to go in and they're going to put some equity into the transaction and go to the capital markets to raise debt to finance the transaction, we're doing the same thing, right? And initially, we had to educate the banks as to ESOPs. We had to educate the funds to ESOPs. We had to educate all parts of the marketplace as to why they should be lending into an ESOP transaction at terms similar to what the private equity firms are doing. And so now we have got the same access to the capital markets as the private equity firm, doing up and down the markets. Last year, we closed our first high yield leveraged bond offering to finance an ESOP, we raised over $500 million for that transaction. So we've gone in and said to these business owners, you could do it and we're going to help you do it. And that's where the money comes from. It's a debt-driven transaction. There's no equity in the deal. But since the owners aren't paying capital gains taxes when they receive those funds, that's the equity piece that we're able to fill in the gap.
How does an ESOP give shareholders more after-tax value and more than private equity?
Well, a couple of things when we're going to talk about after-tax value. Number one, just from a strict monetary perspective, right? When you sell to an ESOP under Section 1042 of the code, when you receive those proceeds, if you reinvest into qualified replacement property, similar to a 1031 in real estate, except much more flexible, you could defer paying capital gains taxes as long as you hold that replacement property. There's a whole industry that's popped up helping business owners satisfy that QRP requirement. But number one, right off the bat, you're not paying these taxes. And that's kind of like the great equalization factor with what you're going to see with the private equity deal. But in addition, right, how does it give them more? And this is really, sometimes we go into a transaction and the private equity offers are more than what they're going to be able to get from selling to an ESOP. Most of our deals are done directly, though, with private family-owned businesses. And they could be a business in Des Moines, Iowa, or a remote portion of Iowa, and they're the prime employer in that town. So when these companies start looking for a liquidity strategy, and these employees have been with them, in some cases, since they've been in that community since the 19th century, while they want to get the value for the company, getting the absolute maximum last dollar off the table is not what's driving most of the people that are doing an ESOP. They want value, they want strong value, but they're also looking at their community and what selling to a third party could ultimately do to their community.
Well said. What industries do you serve?
We're industry agnostic. Okay. So right now we're probably working on 30 or 40 different transactions. We're working with companies in the construction industry, manufacturing, distribution, transportation, services and consulting. We've got a large medical practice ESOP transaction right now. You've probably done some episodes on the healthcare industry, and we're offering ESOPs to medical practices, the same kind of a structure that they're getting through private equity. They could do it through an ESOP. So you name any type. We've done accounting firms. We've done certain specialized law firms. You name any type of an industry. And as long as those companies are paying taxes, then the ESOP could be an alternative structure for them.
Very interesting. What are you most proud of in your career to date?
Well, I think in general, we're most proud of, we've probably made hundreds, if not thousands of employees, millionaires through use of putting the ESOP in place. And I'll just give you one quick story. One of the earlier ESOPs I did turned out extremely well. And it was a limited workforce. So most of the top executives at the company, when the company was sold 4 or 5 years later, walked away with north of $1 million in their retirement account. And independent of this, I was playing at a casual poker game with my brother-in-law and some of his friends. And there was one of the guys who I'd never met before who said, yeah, my wife worked at, and they had a special needs child that really needed a lot of care, and it was very expensive. And he said, my wife worked at an ESOP company. Through the sale of her stock when the company was sold, she was able to fund the care for the rest of his life through the proceeds that she received from the ESOP. And to me, that was amazing. And we see this time and time again now that we're really transforming not just the selling shareholders, right? They're happy and they're getting a great deal, but it's also the people that help build these companies that are now getting to participate in capitalism and ultimately sell and get this money. So it's a nice thing to do.
Very positive. What is your approach to identifying risk factors that can lead to permanent impairment of capital?
Just like everybody else, right? Anytime we're going into a company, we're going to be the liaison between the company and the credit markets. Okay. And so we try to do the same type of due diligence and stress testing as any type of private equity firm could come into a company and do, right? What could happen to impair this company's future cash flow? And of course, because of the ESOP and the company not paying taxes, they're always going to be better off. At least there's some positive cash flow. So when you're stress testing an ESOP, even if the company is performing, 50% less, they're still generating the same after-tax cash flow. So you've got more buffer in your ability if things go wrong. But it's the same thing, right? How big is your order book? How sticky is your clientele? The same kind of stuff that a private equity firm is going to go in, we try to analyze. And the better companies could get, 6, 7 times EBITDA. Companies that don't have that, they can get 2 times EBITDA on a loan. So it just runs the gamut, and it's the same analysis that any private equity firm will come in and do.
How do you help clients determine whether it's worth exploring an ESOP transaction?
Right. So we do a lot of that, right? So we're a very quantitative driven firm, right? So the first thing that we go into a business owner is that we say, look, you have all these other options, right? And which is the best option for you? We're going to run financial models, and we do this virtually every day. We're going to say, what does an ESOP look compared to private equity day one? What does it look like in years 3, 4, 5? What does it look like in compared to a strategic value and strategic buyer? So we're running all these different models with different assumptions. And then we come through it and we work. Normally, we're introduced to these clients through a trusted advisor, whether it's their accountant, their lawyer, or some other type of their financial wealth manager. And so we're including them in the process. And collectively, they look at it. And you also need to include estate planning. All the things that you look at in any type of a sale gets incorporated into the analysis.
Very, very positive. What kind of analytics and data drive the ESOP's recommendations?
Number one, you start with the same thing. So we start with the same base financial models they would with the private equity. You could have a low growth, moderate growth, high growth case, looking at the cash flow of the business. Is it cash flow intensive? Is it not cash flow intensive? We have to look at factors that lower taxable income, such as a QBI deduction, depreciation. And then we look at the company and saying, okay, how much the bottom line driver with, does the ESOP really make sense? The higher the taxes that those companies are paying. When I say the companies, they're usually pass-through entities 95% of the time, either an S or an LLC, but paying taxes at the personal level. And then we say, okay, when we layer on the ESOP, right, how much better off will those companies be? And then we say, how much money can we borrow, right? What's the value of the company for ESOP purposes? So all these, when we do analysis, it's usually a 60-page analysis that covers value, capital raise, cost of capital, the ability to pay that down based on various assumptions. So again, it's a lot of modeling, and that's where people appreciate the detail that goes into this analytical exercise.
Very professional. Describe the culture and philosophy of your firm.
Our culture and philosophy is always do the right thing for the client, right? So number one, client comes first, second, and third. Always, tell the good news and the bad news. If it makes sense, let's go for it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And let's not waste everybody's time and try to put a square peg in a round hole. Most people at CSG have been with us for for the last 20 years. When they start coming, very few people leave. Most of our managing directors, they become a managing director emeritus. So even though they're not working full time anymore, one ex-partner who's now in his 80s, and he's still bringing in business. And so he'll work with some of the younger people, they'll run the deals and he'll do it. So we have no stop limit. You could continue working. And then now what we've really done over the last 5 years is bring in a real good core group of younger people that are going to be the future of this firm. I think we give the best training. I mean, we know that because a lot of times historically they kind of target our employees and take them over to the bigger banks. And then sometimes we just hired our new head of capital markets. Had worked with us 15 years ago, went to work for the major banks, and then we brought him back in. And he's been a phenomenal help for us, opening up new sources of capital that we could never have touched by ourselves. So that was great.
I'm proud of you and your team. The continuity and flourishing and really doing the training with internal and then the mentoring, I think is very, very positive. And that leads me to ask you, what do you love what you do and what do you find most rewarding personally?
Yeah, so I'm not a normal person because I love what I do, right? I mean, we're working with different business owners and different businesses all around the country. One thing I really didn't love was I was on a plane, usually 2 or 3 days a week. Now under COVID, I sit here. We're doing a meeting in Los Angeles. I'm doing a meeting in Phoenix, and I don't have to travel as much. I enjoy that, but I enjoy working with business owners, right? And I enjoy working with the companies and then seeing them transform and then seeing the success that comes out of these businesses and how successful they could become and how wealth it's a tremendous wealth creator, not just for the few people on top, but for all of the employees at the company. And it really is great when you start to see some of these companies and the success they've had. And since I've been doing this now, it's our 21st year, we see some major success stories.
It's exciting. It's not just the top C-level, but really it's the employees at that point. And
we've got, hourly employee workers at companies that have got retirement accounts that are in the 7 figures.
Tremendous. What would be your personal legacy?
What would be my personal legacy? Just that to see our firm and the work that we're continuing to do, to see it continue, to see that, we're out here and do more of them. Unfortunately, ESOPs are, a backwater area of finance. Most people don't know them. So when you look at the benefit they bring versus the amount of market penetration they have, we're just scratching the surface. What I would like to see is a company that hopefully this year we're going to do 25 to 30 of these transactions, but in 5 years we're doing 150 to 200 of these transactions, and just to continue what we're doing, but in a bigger, more broad-based way.
Very positive. I truly appreciate you spending the quality educational time with our listeners today, Larry. Larry, can I share your contact information with our listeners?
Absolutely.
You can reach Larry by email at info@csgpartners.com, which is spelled info, I-N-F-O, at csgpartners.com. You can reach Larry by phone at 212-433-5500. Again, that's 212-433-5500. Thank you for our listeners. I look forward to being back with you shortly for another episode of the Private Equity Profits Podcast. This show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC.